For the time being, we'd go with no. So the House believes at this time that no, capitalism has not lost its way. Let me get you to meet the two teams that will be squaring off this evening. Let me introduce the team that's speaking against the motion first. I'd like to begin by introducing Frank Savage. Frank Savage was the Chief Executive Officer of Savage Holdings, a global financial services company. He has a 40-year career in international banking, corporate finance, and global investment management. He has been engaged in providing investment services in the Middle East since 1969. Suhel is the managing partner of Councilage India and founder of Equus. He's one of India's best-known debaters and is known to argue opposite positions with equal passion. Suhel also writes provocative columns in the Financial Times, in London, and Business Standard in India. Suhel is an alumni of the Harvard Business School and is very big on the theatre scene in Delhi. Paranjoy Guha Thakurta is an independent journalist and educator. His work experience, spanning nearly 35 years, cuts across different media, print, radio, television, and documentary cinema. He's a writer, speaker, author, interviewer, teacher, and commentator. I'd now like to introduce the team that's speaking for the motion. Professor Michael Sandel is a professor of government at Harvard University, where he has taught political philosophy since 1980. His recent book, Justice, What's the Right Thing to Do, relates the big questions of political philosophy to the most vexing issues of our time. At Harvard, Sandel's courses include ethics, biotechnology, and the future of human nature, ethics, economics, and law, and globalization and its critics. His undergraduate course, Justice, has enrolled over 15,000 students and is the first Harvard course to be made freely available online. Shoma Chaudhury is the managing editor of Tehelka. She'd earlier worked with Pioneer, India Today, and Outlook. In 2000, she left Outlook to join Tarun Tejpal and was among the team that started Tehelka.com. She's written extensively on several conflicts across the country: people versus the state, the Maoist insurgency, the Muslim question, the issues of capitalist development, and land grab. She's also one of India's most award-winning journalists. Sudeep Chakrabarty is a journalist, author of the acclaimed book, The Red Sun. He began his career in journalism in 1985 at the South Asia Bureau of the Asian Wall Street Journal, Dow Jones. Till recently, he worked with us at the India Today Group before retiring to his cocoon in Goa. Ladies and gentlemen, let's begin this debate. I want to invite first Shoma Chaudhury, and she'll be speaking for the motion, Capitalism Has Lost Its Way. Let's hear it for her, please.
Good evening, everyone. I have to tell you, I turned up a little late for the preliminary meeting, and the men sold me out in my absence and made me the first speaker. Capitalism has lost its way is a premise that even my opponents are going to argue for. If you go by the idea that the entire goal of human enterprise is not just to put a bit of cash into your bank or to your offshore account, but to have a modicum of happiness and sustainability, then we won't even be arguing this premise. But if I even look at capitalism by its own self-description, which is to amass wealth through fair means, through the free flow of capital and of goods and labor across countries and societies, and to have level and transparent playing fields. Even by its own definition, capitalism hasn't just lost its way, it's fallen off the track and is completely mutilated. Recently, a very senior economist with the IMF, somebody called Davison Budhu, put in his resignation letter, and he said that I think there isn't enough soap in this world to cleanse me of everything that I have done in the name of the IMF. And the IMF is one of the holy trinity of the World Bank, IMF, and World Trade Organization that forms the trinity of capitalism. Why has capitalism come to be the way it is? Because driven by the greed motive, today everything about capitalism has become subverted. Raghuram Rajan, who's the financial advisor to the Prime Minister in India, himself has said that crony capitalism is subverting democracy. Every enterprise that we see today is done in markets that are not open, that are not free, and are not transparent, but are constructed for the advancement of the few by the few. Every financial regulation, everything is subverted. Capitalism today has just been about cornering land, resources, and access to capital by the very few who are influential, who can corner governments, and who can inveigle upon governments to keep the rest of the country or rest of the world out and just preserve and grow their own privileges. In India particularly, what we are seeing is a complete devastation. Everywhere in the last 20 years, everywhere across the country, you will see that a certain percentage of our society has grown richer, more privileged, has greater access to global capital, but the poor have got poorer. Not only that, our land and our resources have been cornered and are literally being cannibalized by a very few and a very slim part of our society. Rahul just said that the voice vote was against the motion, but actually I just saw very few people who are extremely well-heeled saying that capitalism is just fine. If you ask 80% of India how they perceive capitalism, you will get a very, very dark picture. What really happens is that in a capitalist system governed by, by big financial regulatory bodies, the urge is to dismantle everything that will provide welfare, the basics of human need, happiness, health, education, to dismantle structures that provide it in an equitable way, regardless of your capacity to buy that. They want you to dismantle that mechanism and pass it on to profit-driven companies. The problem with passing on all of this, all of human enterprise, merely to the idea of profit, is that it is completely devoid of the idea of empathy. Not only that, if it is not profitable to provide electricity to the last mile village, if it is not profitable to provide drinking water to the millions of people in India or elsewhere in the globe, then corporates will not do it. Whereas the states that we elect are meant to do it. So a criticism of capitalism is not to say that one wants to go back to a totalitarian or a socialist regime. It is merely to say that it is time that capitalism revised its self-description, introspected about itself,
Ladies and gentlemen, speaking against the motion, kicking off proceedings for this team, Mr. Suhel, Seth.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've known Shoma for many years. She's had a wonderfully simple, non-capitalist driven education. Went to a fine college, Lady Shriram Michael teaches at Harvard, whose endowment grows every year. You can keep blaming capitalism, and I agree that there are mistakes that have been made, but those mistakes have been corrected. And it is an enduring process of course correction. The tragedy is we've started taking strident positions because it's the flavor of the month. It's important to bash banks, it's important to bash the rich, but yet you want to wear brands. You can't have this festival if it didn't have sponsors. You can't have Think and Goa if you didn't have sponsors. So here's what we want to say. Capitalism will continue to lose its way, but to say that it's a finality in terms of having lost its way and it's over is incorrect. In 2008, when Lehman Brothers crashed, it was a wake-up call for everyone. But I want to correct the perception in this house. Capitalism is not about banking. It's about the availability, the creation, and hopefully the fair disbursement of wealth. If that is the leitmotif of capitalism, then capitalism must remain. To therefore say that capitalism is this ogre, is this demon that we must get rid of is silly. It's an unsustainable argument. The second point that we wish to make, and one of my colleagues, Paranjoy, given his knack for being the contrarian that he is, will perhaps say that capitalism never had a way, which is fine. What are we actually dealing with in this world? Forget this country. We are dealing with a few who believe that they can get away with actually messing the system up. But we've seen in this very country movements, including by the Tehelkas of the world, that they've been able to course correct the ugly face of capitalism and bring it back to the real good that it is intended for, which is the creation of wealth, the availability of aspiration, and the non-denial of opportunity. And I think the single biggest contribution of capitalism is its ability to create, its purposefulness to provide equal opportunities as far as possible. Like in everything else, including the media, there will be rotten apples. But those rotten apples need to be gotten rid of. You can't throw the baby with the bathwater. Because no matter what we might say at the Jaipur Literature Festival to sound activist, liberal, concerned about the masses, you can't get away from the realities of capitalism. And neither of us wants to go back to, as Shoma said, a totalitarian state, a state which is repressive or one which controls everything like we did have up until the 1990s in this country. Finally, our contention is that capitalism is not always good, but nothing is. Capitalism will not always be the perfect birthmark on this evolutionary planet that we live in. Nothing is. But is capitalism a reality? The answer is yes. Is capitalism required? The answer is yes. Can capitalism do good? The answer is yes. Today, the fact that the symbol of capitalism, in a manner of speaking, runs the largest foundation for AIDS in the world is a sign of the times to come. I won't wait for this man to interrupt me further. You have a splendid evening. Remember, vote with your conscience and not with some archaic liberal thought that will make you look fashionable as you're walking out of Diggy Palace. Thank you.
To counter Suhel and to speak against the motion, may I invite Sudeep Chakrabarty, please?
Well, this is fun. You know, okay, let me just get a few things out of the way so that we can sort of cut through the rubbish, if I may call it, the sort of the woolly-headedness, the cobwebs, all of that. So, okay, Mao ended up being a bad guy. Let me just say it. Mao was a bad guy, ended up making China look very, very bad. Even in China, he's now the description for him, I believe, is 30% bad, 70% good. A few decades ago, it used to be 100% good or off with your head. The Soviet Union is no more. I've personally seen the broken Berlin Wall, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the Soviet Union has embraced capitalism. So be it, no problem with that. And I don't think that's the issue here. I don't think we're talking about the victory over a capitalist system or over a socialist system or over of socialism over capitalism. And has capitalism lost its way? Yes, I think it has. I think, in fact, let me be contrarian in the beginning and I say that it's a valid route to take for those who believe in it, and that's all very well. But what concerns me are a few things. I'm concerned with the fact that capitalism is actually, unfortunately, made itself very, very arrogant. I think it has assumed for itself all the arrogance and all the megalomania that it heaped upon socialism all these years. And I will explain why I believe so. You know, we've been talking about the subprime crisis, we've been talking about all sorts of things, and as this is a literary festival, let me quote from this gentleman of sorts, a bit of a maverick as well, who, George Bernard Shaw, at least I'm not quoting Shakespeare, so you're going to forgive me for that. I mean, he said capitalism has destroyed our belief in any effective power, but that of self-interest backed by force. And he said this a long time ago. And wonderful, we'll be there. And the thing is, can we tone that down? I can't hear myself think. And here, I wanted to preface this. I wanted to preface by using Mr. Shaw's statement by describing to this very sad scene that has stayed with me all the while. Is that of this sort of what I call what shall I call him? The Arnold Schwarzenegger of capitalism. I mean, the former governor of the Federal Reserve Bank, almost breaking down in a congressional hearing and saying, "I got it wrong." Alan Greenspan, we remember that? I think that was a sort of a touch point in history, if you will. And I'm not saying, I mean, if it's coming from Alan, and he says that we've lost our way, we need to sort of renegotiate these moments, I think there's something over there. And what so Shoma touched upon this in the beginning, and I really believe that, it's, for all that capitalism has assumed for itself, and I think it's assumed far more than just a description of capitalism. It has assumed for itself control over democracy. It's assumed for itself control over free speech. It's assumed for itself all the grand liberal thoughts, which actually runs contrary to what Suhel was saying in a way. And I think that while assuming all these powers to itself, it has also triumphed over them. And we see today the sort of the result of it, the seeds of it, these vast pools of negative energy that have been sown and sort of ripple in our country, thank you, by capitalism that I think has lost its way. We, I think, have grown to treat our own people very, very badly. We do not believe in all the values that capitalism has imposed upon us, and we began to believe very, very strongly. So where is the right to freedom of speech beyond organizations like these and venues like this? Where is the right to speak freely in Outland? out there, places that are out of sight and out of an easily digestible mental construct. Where is the freedom of speech there? Where is the freedom of informed consent? Thank you very much.
To speak against the motion, I'd now like to invite Frank Savage.
I'm a guest in your country, so I don't want to say anything to get you all upset. But I would start off by asking one question. Show me another economic system over the last 200 years that has provided mobility for so many people, that has enabled people to have more control over their own economic destiny, that has helped to broaden the middle class in countries, including here in Egypt. Show me an emerging market, an emerging economy that has not decided to incorporate many of the facets of capitalism, such as a stock market, so you can raise capital, such as ownership of businesses, such as the protection of rights for investors, both domestic and international, and the resultant increase of capital that has come into those markets. Why has China, which calls itself a communist state, why have they permitted private ownership? Why do they have banks? Why do they have a stock market? You know why? Because they need